on this beautiful Friday. Yes, it is Friday. We haven't even done the Friday thing. We've been so caught up in everything else that's going on, man.
Well, understandably so.
It's true. Yeah, we've had a few things going on.
Tone put up in the private chat. Tone put up. He says, "Look, Monday could be a special day for Philly again. Cowboys play the Chargers. Phillies play D-backs. Cowboys could lose, and the Phillies could definitely win. Let's do it, Philly. It could be the perfect storm. Could
yes,
be.
Sir. That would be a perfect storm. That would be nice. Let's keep adding on to these good memories we're stacking here in this fun. It is awesome. It is awesome. All right, let's bring on our next guest. He's been kind enough to hop on with us throughout the course of the season, and we keep it rolling here in the postseason. And that is Scott Lauber from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Does a phenomenal job covering the team and covering the sport. Scott, how are you, my friend? Good morning.
Doing well. How are you guys?
Good. No hangover, no champagne hangover for you. Nothing like that.
Good. Let's explore that, Scott. All right. I'm assuming you were in the clubhouse, correct?
I was.
Okay.
Yes.
So what's the move? Like, do you after you finish up all the work that you have to do are you driving home in like plastic and then you get home and shower right away? Like, what's the move after the celebration?
Yeah. I'll let you know when I figure it out for sure. It's weird. You go down there and you try to. I think the more of these you do, the more you figure out like how to sort of avoid getting completely drenched.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people you have to talk to who are in the middle of it all, and so you're going to get hit by some stuff, and then you got to go upstairs when it's all over and sit down and work, and you kind of just everyone stinks, and it's just like. It's just a giant kind of like, look, we just got to get through this all together. And then you get home and it's like 2:00 in the morning and like, well, I got to get in the shower. I got to do something because I can't go to sleep like this. So, yeah, I mean, we've had 7 of these, I want to say, since they clinched the playoff spot last year in Houston. So I'm trying to get into a routine, like trying to figure out how to do it so that it's as comfortable as possible. But yeah, like that drive home, you're by yourself in your car and you're like, man, I stink. And it's not just, it's beer, it's champagne, it's cigar smell. It's like a frat party in your car.
Yeah. It's like the old days. Yeah.
Okay. So what time did you have to file your story by?
So I had to file one right as soon as the game ended.
Okay.
And then one of the good things, I guess, about these late starts is that, you're so past the old print deadline that you can take more time downstairs. So it's kind of like, as soon as you can when you get upstairs, but it's not like the old days where, you had a super, super late print deadline back in the day and you had to, it was late, but it still wasn't late enough and you had to make that. So I guess it's a little easier than it was back then, but one story as soon as it's over and then, keep going.
Scott, let's talk about the degree of difficulty on the Rojas catch, which, probably the key moment of the night. I mean, you can make an argument for a bunch of them, but that was certainly, you can make an argument there. The ball's smoked, number one, by Acuna. He's coming to the weird part of the wall that angles out where you're almost coming to a point as opposed to just the padded wall that you may hit if you make a catch, which has got to make it that much more difficult. I mean, not only are you on a run for it, and I know some people are like, well, he didn't play it perfectly. Like, my God, give me a break. But anyway, so he makes that catch knowing that that's kind of bearing down on him, man. Just your thoughts on that play that he makes and why the guy's there.
Yeah, it was one of those where you watch it happen in front of you and all you can say when it's over is like, wow, you audibly say that because it was that kind of play. And I thought it was a hit. I thought it was going to be at least a double and maybe the game would be tied. Mm-hmm. That's what he's there for. He went 0 for 14, I want to say, in the series. Okay. Didn't have a hit. I don't think he's had a hit since game 1 against the Marlins, but they're not wavering. They're not going to take him out because they view him as somebody who can help them win games with his glove alone. He doesn't have to hit in order for him to help them. And you saw that last night. He made the play of the game without a doubt. And we've seen him make plays like this since the day he got here. And we heard about it before that. I mean, when he was in the minor leagues, I had people tell me, like, wait till you see this guy play center field. He's the best center fielder I've ever seen. And I heard, similar things about Jackie Bradley Jr. when I covered the Red Sox, kind of his defense preceded him, and then he got to the majors and you watched it and you said, wow, like it really lives up to the billing. And I think that's what I find with Rojas is that, you know, from that first day when he made that catch against the Padres in that doubleheader, you know, he's made very, very difficult catches look easier than they were. And as much as I said, wow, when he made that catch, I suspect it was even a much more difficult catch than it looked because he wasn't at the wall. He was at the warning track. He leaped, but like you said, it's kind of a weird part of the ballpark. It's that 409 sign where the wall does jut out. Maybe he thought he was closer than he was. You know, in hindsight, maybe he doesn't have to leap. Maybe he's got the room. So there was a lot of difficulty in making that play. Just you know, if it was in the first inning and you know there was room for error in the eighth inning of a game like that and that magnitude. So sure, I mean it was certainly a highlight, and there's a reason I think why after the game last night, some of us were talking to John Middleton, and he told us that he told Gary Maddox on Alumni Weekend that this guy could be the next Secretary of Defense. He's that good. And,
that's high praise. Yeah.
Yeah. High praise indeed.
Scott, I can't get over the fact that when you look at where the Phillies are right now, you know, most teams, you have 2-3 players you consistently rely on in big moments. With this team, it's all hands on deck. There is no, you know, I was just joking with Rob in the last segment. Castellanos has outshined Schwarber in the home run department. You know, you get Stott making big plays, grand slams. You get Rojas making big. It's not just the Harper, Turner, Schwarber show. It's all hands on deck. And then you look at the moves that Rob Thompson made last night. The guys who usually close, he brings in the middle, and the guys in the middle, he puts at the end. You know, it's like the perfect storm with this team right now. Yeah, it is. And, you know, I wrote today that Rob Thompson – so I was talking to Rob Thompson before the game yesterday, and he plays a little – not every day, but there are days where, like, you know, there's a kind of a lull in the afternoon before batting practice. And so maybe he'll take the lineup card and he goes over to the coach's room and they kind of have a little fun and they say, all right, who's your pick to click tonight? And, you know, the last 2 Octobers, you got to like really work at it to not get that right. Because there's 3 or 4 or 5 picks to click every single night. So, you know, like last night, if you looked at it, you know, you might go with Nick Castellanos. He had the 2 home runs the night before, but what are the odds he's going to have a game like that again? And he makes history, and he has a game like that again, becomes the first guy to hit multi back-to-back multi-home run games. You know, Trey Turner, you probably wouldn't have picked. He was 0 for 17 against Spencer Strider, and what does he do? Double, single, homer, and then he adds a hit later in the game. And the homer puts them ahead 2-1. You know, how about Matt Strahm, right? Matt Strahm closes out the game. He closed out 2 games all year. He started the season in the rotation. You know, he was talking after the game about how, like, I couldn't tell you how many times when I was a kid, I was on my front lawn going 3-2 count World Series. And that's the closest he'd come to one of those moments. And he's been in the big leagues for a while. And, you know, he closes it out last night. You know, Rojas makes that catch. You know, obviously Harper's a good pick to click pretty much any night that they play, especially in the postseason. So you're right. Like, it seems like it's not just a different person every night; it's multiples. And you know, it's been an amazing run. Like game 1, we talked about how they managed that game. You know, like I know Rob Thompson says there was no script. Well, there was a script. I mean, the idea was that they'd go with Suarez into a certain point, and then they were going to, you know, bullpen it the rest of the way, and they did it. And you know, I kind of thought coming into the postseason, I don't know if I said this to you guys, but I know I've said this to other people and I've written this, is that, you know, one of the things about having a deep bullpen the way they do, I mean, every manager would rather have more options than fewer options. Every time you make a pitching change, you increase the odds you might get it wrong. So when you have a game like game 1 or a game like last night where you're making 5-6 pitching changes in the game, the odds that you're going to get them all right, I mean, think about that. Like, push all the right buttons.
Almost
it's
impossible.
not like a formula where back in the day, like the Yankees went starting pitcher, you know, setup guy Mariano Rivera, and it was every single time. He's mixing and matching righties. He's bringing in Alvarado in the 6th inning to face Olsen, knowing he's going to have to face him again in the 8th or 9th, and who's going to go get him. And this time it was Soto. In the past, it's been Strahm. I mean, so he's pushing like 6 or 7 buttons in that bullpen every night. He's getting them all right, and it's kind of unbelievable.
As that started unfolding Scott, after you were getting past like Kimbrel and Alvarado, you start doing the math and you're like, whoa, man, this is going to be fascinating. I know you still had Hoffman, you had Kerkering at one point. I'm like, are we really going to see him in this kind? I mean, I know he's a pretty level dude, but that's heavy, serious stuff right there. And then Strom, I mean, it was amazing, man, the way that finished out.
I was wondering if it was going to be Kerkering in the ninth inning, because Rob Thompson keeps saying, I'm not afraid to use him. I'm not afraid to use him. He even said yesterday, I'd use him back-to-back games, which is not something he had done in the minor leagues. And yet you watch how he has used him, and it hasn't been the highest of highest leverage, right? It's been the bottom of the order against the Braves in game 2, I believe that was, or game 1, I'm sorry. It's been, with a big lead against the Marlins. So he hasn't like really unleashed him. And the other day, I talked to Bud Black, who manages the Rockies, and he was the Angels pitching coach in 2002 when they had K-Rod. And he said, yeah, we just sort of like unleashed K-Rod on everyone in the postseason. And that was a carbon copy situation. He came up at the end of the season, made 5 appearances in September. Kerkering made 3. I think they came up within a few days of each other on the calendar. So, yeah, I mean, I was sort of like, well, is this, he's used Alvarado, he's used Kimbrel. If he wants to go, he's used Dominguez. If he wants to go to a righty in the 9th, I wonder if he goes Kerkering there to start an inning, because we know he likes Hoffman with men on base. That's kind of how I thought it was going to play out. And then it ends up being Strom, and it doesn't make a difference. So, like, you just kind of have to, at this point, you just kind of have to say, like, Rob Thompson's got some kind of magic dust down there in the bullpen, and Strom was saying, like, somebody said to Strom last night, like, when did you know that it would be you to close it out? Like, did they tell you ahead of time? And he goes, no, I just kind of looked around in the bullpen, and I was like, well, no Alvarado, no Kimbrel.
Yeah, not too many people left now. Yeah,
Hoffman and I kind of looked at each other, and it was like, well, it's you or me. So, like, I mean, and it doesn't seem to bother these guys either. So it's pretty. I can't say I've seen, like a run of good fortune the way they've had, or good decisions.
Let me ask you this. This is from Taz. Scott, how much does Scott think Rob's style of management is instinctual versus analytical, especially in games like last night with the constant bullpen rotation? So it's kind of along the lines of what you were talking about. But I know you said he has a game plan, but I don't know that he planned that Strom was going to finish this thing, right? There is some gut involved as well as you're doing this.
Yeah. I think it's a combination of the two, which is a cop-out answer. I know, like, everyone wants black or white, up or down. But I do think it's a combination of those things. Like, I think they went into the Brave series saying, like, we want Alvarado on Olsen in every leverage spot we can get him. So, if it's close game, 6th inning, high leverage, that's going to be it. And then we'll worry about later, because that might not be his highest spot. So that's analytical, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, there's got to be an element of gut and instinct involved in this. And that's why, I say, like, I'm curious to see Kerkering moving forward in the Arizona series and how they use him, whether, the gut says, hey, let's just fully unleash this kid. But certainly they like their, you hear Rob Thompson talk about pockets of the lineup. It's nowadays, especially with the 3 batter rule for relievers, they try to identify pockets for these guys. And I thought you saw in game 1, especially, like, Dominguez was going to get the Acuna-Riley pocket, it seemed like. And Alvarado was going to get a pocket that involved Olsen. And, I think Kerkering was going to get a lower in the order pocket. So I guess from an analytical standpoint, they try to match it up as best they can. But he's got to have the instincts, and he's got to have the guts to kind of make the moves they make. And I think it starts with that, and it goes from there.
Scott, I had mentioned a stat in general when we're talking about the playoffs in general. I had mentioned a stat earlier to Rob, which I thought was phenomenal when you look at all the playoff games that have been played up to this point. Teams that won 90 games or more went 1-13 up to this point. You're talking about 3 teams that won over 100 games gone in their first round. 3 teams that got buys gone. It's like, and they got swept out. Atlanta won 1 game. It's one of the most phenomenal, unexplainable playoff scenarios I've seen in quite some time.
Yeah. So I've talked about this a lot with people the last few days, I suppose, especially within the last week. And I have mixed feelings about it. So, like, maybe it's because like what I do, like my job requires that I pay attention to baseball from the start of the season to the end. So I tend to be a defender of the regular season. Like I'd like to think that the 162 games means a lot, and that winning your division is an achievement. It's an accomplishment. And so I kind of feel like division champions should be rewarded with more than just a bye in the best of 3 round and home field advantage. Like to me, going into this series, there was way, way too much pressure on the Braves to win game 1 than there should have been. Like they lost game 1 and they lost control of the series.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I know they came back and they won game 2, but they had to come here for the next 2 games. You know, to me, it was like you won 104 games and you did all of that, and then you lose game 1 and you're really kind of you're in a mess, right? So part of me feels that like that. And I think the solution is simple. I think the solution is, you know, either make the division round 7 games, because now you lose game 1, you have a little bit more room for error. You have a little bit more leeway. Or shorten up the wild card round. Like television loves that 1-game knockout round, right? So I was sort of talking to some people who were saying, what about if you have the 4, 5, and 6 seeds are all wild cards? What if you had 5 play 6 in a 1-game knockout on the first day of the postseason on that Monday? Then you have the winner goes to play 4 at their place on Tuesday, 1-game knockout, and then the winner advances to play in the divisional round against that division champion, and they have a little bit of less sitting around time. Because I think a bye in baseball doesn't serve the same purpose that it does in the other sports. Baseball's a rhythm sport. It's a routine sport. These guys never, ever take 5 days off. Having said all of that, as a sports fan, you know, nobody has a problem in the NCAA tournament when a Cinderella team shows up in the Final Four, right? Nobody minded that the Miami Heat were in the finals last year in the NBA as a wild card team or an 8 seed or whatever they consider that now, that round that they came out of. So upsets are good. People like underdogs. And so what's wrong with, you know, division champions getting toppled? I just think baseball does need to look at it, though, because it's not just the Atlanta Braves. It's the Dodgers. It's the Orioles. And again, the flip side of that is it doesn't seem to bother the Astros. They get buys every year and they win their division, and they won the World Series last year. So, you know, I do think it's something baseball's got to look at. I do think it's more than just a Braves thing. It's a division champs thing. And maybe it's as simple as making the first round 7 games instead of 5. And you give that team a little bit more breathing room if they lose game 1 at home.
Well, I'll just look. I know Strider is not the biggest. Philadelphia fans don't love Spencer Strider. I don't know where he ranks. RC is probably 1, but here's what he said after the game regarding this: the people trying to use the playoff format to make an excuse for the results, they don't like. They don't like are not confronting the real issue. I think what he's trying to say is they're not confronting the real issue. You're in control of your focus, your competitiveness, your energy. If having 5 days means you can't make the adjustment, you have nobody to blame but yourself. Props to Spencer Strider there. You know, like to me, there's a simple solution to all this. Win. Stop making excuses and win. You were the best team in baseball all year. And, you know, the Phillies pitching completely held you down. At some point, it's not about the 8 days off or any of the other stuff. It's because you didn't deliver and they got outplayed, period. I mean,
no, you're right. And you're right. And look, I happen to think the Phillies, were better than they were. I mean, I think if you looked at their rosters and the state of their rosters right now, you know, no Charlie Morton for the Braves. Braves pitching has been a little bit suspect now for quite a while. The Phillies were just a more complete team. And I kind of think if it was a 7-game series, they probably win a 7-game series as well. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I do say that the Braves were in their own head from the beginning of all of this, whether it was the Phillies. You know, I think we talked about the Braves celebrating the division title in Philadelphia, and some of their players after the game, AJ Minter, some other guys were saying how it meant something to them that they clinched the division in Philadelphia because that's where it ended for them last year. And they felt like they had to get past that. They had to move on from that. And I heard that and I thought, you know, which team was 14 games better than the other team? Because if you're that much better, it doesn't matter where you clinch. And maybe the move would have been, don't celebrate the division championship. Say, hey, look, we know we're going to face you guys again. We'll get you in 3 weeks. when it really matters and when the celebration carries more weight. So I think the Phillies were in their heads. I also think the format was in their heads. They did everything the opposite of what they did last year. They went to the extreme of playing games intra-squad games at night under the lights and bringing fans in and bringing minor leaguers in to play against because they wanted to stay sharp. Last year, they played normal intra-squad games in the morning at their ballpark, and it was relaxed. And maybe they thought they lost some focus or lost some of that edge. They did everything the opposite, and it didn't matter. They still lost to the Phillies in 4 games. So I think it was all in their heads right from the start, and then they lose game 1, and they were on their heels right from the beginning.
Scott, can you put in perspective? Rob Thompson has been meticulous, but then he throws this kid Kettering in there. What a phenomenal story this is. He puts this kid in big moment situations. It doesn't make a difference to him. He doesn't care what anybody thinks. He doesn't care about analytics. It's a feel for him. And I just love how he approaches the game. I'm one of these people. I'm old school stuff. I hate analytics in sports. I really do. I hate computers basically deciding football, baseball, when you should do certain things, strategic moves, so on and so forth. I just love the old school feel that Rob Thompson seems to have in making these chess moves game in and game out.
Yeah, I'd expand it out. I'd say it's organizational.
Okay.
I think they have a very old school president of baseball ops and Dave Dombrowski, right, who goes back to the days when, scouting reports were pen to paper and and stuff like that. And it's not that he is an analyst. He's up on analytics. He understands it. He has people who are very smart who work for him, who he's hired to put in place to bring that aspect of it in there. But I think they have found that they have struck a balance between the analytics and the scouting, the eyes on the field and the computers, and Rob Thompson, I think, has achieved that blend. You remember when Joe Girardi got hired, right, after the Gabe Kapler era, and everyone talked about Joe Girardi being a blend, right, an old school, new school blend. And Rob Thompson was his right-hand man for a long time with the Yankees, and he is also a blend. The difference, of course, and Nick Castellanos actually alluded to this last night, is the way that they deal with people. Like Rob Thompson is has a much better feel, I think, for how to deal with players. Castellanos said he came in here last year. They had a very talented team. They did not start well. The manager, was constantly juggling the lineup. The manager was, it looked like he was projecting a little bit of panic. It set in the room. Like Rob Thompson came in and there were no expectations. He never thought he was going to manage. The team was supposedly done, right, on Memorial Day, not going to make the playoffs, another year without the playoffs. And he came in and he brought this even keel. So that's the difference. But I think analytics and old school, they're similar in that they have a feel for the game, but they also understand the numbers. So when you talk about Kerkering, right, there's some guts involved in taking this kid who started the year in low A, climbed through the minor leagues, made 3 appearances in the regular season after getting called up, and saying, hey, you know what? He's one of our best arms in the bullpen. We're going to use this kid. We know he doesn't have the experience. But then there's an analytics side to it that says, here's who we want him to face. Here's who his best matchup is. And they felt in the Braves series it wasn't necessarily Riley and Olsen's a lefty, but it wasn't necessarily the middle of the Braves order. It was closer to the bottom of the Braves order. And that's where they thought he would have success against those guys, whether it was his velocity, whether it was the way his slider plays, whether it was just here's who we want to match him up against because of his experience. So they have the guts to say, and they have the sort of feel to say, this guy should be pitching for us in the postseason, and then they let their analytics people help guide them as far as when and where and how and who he should face.
Scott, last one for me. We've gone pretty far without bringing up Bryce Harper, but you talk about the impact and you talk about the swing of emotions between game 3 and 4 with the 2 home runs, the stare down of Arcia, and last night, the elbow getting clipped. What are the odds? I said this to the Gunner earlier. What are the odds that his elbow gets clipped on a play just randomly, where Olsen, not on purpose, but it just bad luck, whatever. There was so much that goes on there, and he hits every right note after he talks. I know people always, and he said it too, bring up the pandering thing. I've never bought it. I think he is genuine, but just the impact that this guy's had on this team.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think it's mostly genuine. I mean, does he lay it on a little thick sometimes? Probably, like I think he understands like how to make his point and how to do it in a way that really hammers it home. But I do think he comes from a genuine place. I do think he has really kind of embraced the whole thing here, the whole experience here. I think he was all in once he decided to sign here. Like he didn't want the opt out because he wanted to set his roots and he wanted to, be here for the long haul. And, the whole Arcia thing, to me, look, I think there's a little bit of Tom Brady in Bryce Harper in that you give him a little bit to cling to, like to grab onto, and he'll use it. I don't think Bryce Harper was angry or upset or felt like he was being dissed or anything like that by Arcia. Honestly, I think he thought it was kind of funny. And, but I think his teammates know how he works. And I think they were all too happy to show him, the funny thing about this is there was no video of this. And the only audio of it was if you were in that clubhouse and you happened to catch it on your tape recorder or your phone.
Yep.
There was no video of it. This was purely a print thing. And, showed him the quotes, attaboy, and it was 2 words. It was attaboy Harper, and he cackled or he laughed, according to the people who were there. It wasn't like, he went on this long tirade about how Bryce Harper's a stupid base runner. All he had to say was attaboy Harper and cackle. And for that to get reported, and then people brought it to Bryce Harper's attention. And look, I saw him walk out on the field to play catch before infield practice before game 3. And he had this look that I, normally like, laughing with his teammates or whatever. No, he was staring straight ahead. He was focused. I was standing with a photographer of ours from the Inquirer, and he said, no, he looks different than he normally looks. And I said, yeah, he does. And shoot, like I think like he just grabbed onto that attaboy Harper thing, like Tom Brady would grab onto the smallest slight.
Yeah.
And use it to his advantage. And I think the great athletes do that. The great players in their sport. Michael Jordan did this, right? Like, everyone who watched The Last Dance sort of realized like how he would grab onto the smallest thing.
He's still that way.
And he's right. And turn it around and use it against you.
Yeah.
So I think that's what happened here. And, I mean, it was up there for me with the homer to clinch the pennant last year. Like for him to do that twice and then stare the guy down and afterwards talk about like, yeah, I looked at him. Yeah, I stared at him.
Yeah, I thought he would at least feign a little bit of, I don't know what you're talking. Now he was
I did too. I thought he'd play it cool. And he was like, no, I looked at him. And he didn't say he was upset. He didn't say he was angry. He didn't say, how dare he? But like, if you're going to give me that, I'm going to take it and I'm going to turn it around against you. And I mean, it's been amazing to watch. It really has. And the fit has been perfect. Dave Dombrowski was talking last night about how Philly's a tough place. It's a great sports city, but it's a tough sports city, and you better be prepared because you might get booed. And people forget, John Middleton reminded me last night, people forget that Bryce Harper got booed in the first month that he was in Philly in 2019 because he didn't get off to a great start. There were a couple of games there where he struck out in big spots and he heard it going back to the dugout. And it didn't matter to him. He just sort of, again, he just sort of uses it to his, to help him. And he's handled everything here exactly the right way. If you had to write the script, right, of how to handle Philadelphia, if you're a high-priced free agent coming in, follow it to a T.
Yep.
Scott, you mentioned the word Cinderella in our conversation a little while ago. And I think that is synonymous with this Arizona team they're about to face. This team right now reminds me a lot of the Phillies of last year. Waiting until the last possible day to get into the playoffs. But my goodness, hitting, pitching, running the bases. It's like, hey, we're not supposed to be here anyway. Give me your early scouting report on this Arizona team they're about to face.
Yeah, and those are the most dangerous teams, right? Yes. Young teams that have not been there before, that seem impervious to the pressure, maybe because they feel like they're playing with house money. You're right. They got in at the very end. They kind of backed in, I think. I think they even lost the night they clinched, but they got a wild card. And I don't know if anybody necessarily looked at them when they clinched and said, they could be the 2022 Phillies because they don't have the star power that the 2022 Phillies and the 2023 Phillies have. But They do have two horses at the top of their rotation in Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly.
Woo.
It's lined up now for them to pitch both of those guys twice in a 7-game series. They've got a young player in Corbin Carroll who's dynamic and a game changer. You know, you think of like Trey Turner's skill set and you know, with the speed and the power, and that's what Corbin Carroll has. Ketel Marte is a really good player, their second baseman.
I love that kid.
Christian Walker can hit at first base. So they have some guys. They have some guys you got to worry about and be careful about. You know, I wonder whether they are the kind of a team, though, that is more dangerous in a short series than they are in a 7-game series, just because the talent gap, maybe from the top of the roster to the bottom, is a little bit more pronounced. But, you know, they are, you know, like, for example, like after game 2, you face Gallen, Kelly, and then the drop off is pretty steep. Yeah. So, you know, but again, they're gonna come in here. They're gonna have to deal with the environment here. Maybe it's less of a thing for a young team that's just gonna throw caution to the wind and say, no one expected us to be here. Let's see how far we can take this thing. The Phillies will be favored for sure, and they'll probably be heavily favored, and they should be heavily favored. But, you know, I don't think you can sleep on the Diamondbacks. One of the really, really fun side angles to the whole thing, I think, is Evan Longoria.
Yes.
Yeah.
16 years later, right, or 15 years later after the World Series in 08, I think he's the last guy left from both of those teams. And, you know, could this be the Evan Longoria revenge series? Like he finally comes. I think he was held hitless in that World Series. They did a great job on him and Carlos Pena. I wonder whether he comes in here feeling like he's got some unfinished business from the very beginning of his career. So I think that's a fun one. I think that's a fun angle to have a good time with. And we'll see. Maybe he can come up with a big hit for Arizona.
He's 37 years old, and he's playing like a kid again.
Yeah.
The plays he made against both the Brewers and the Dodgers defensively, I mean, my goodness. You're right. That's a great story, Scott.
Yeah, that's a fun one for me.
Scott, good stuff, man. Thanks for hopping on.
We
always appreciate you, man. We appreciate the time that you give us, and you can follow him on Twitter/X at Scott Lauber, of course, PhiladelphiaInquirer.com as well. Scott, thanks, man. Keep up the good work. Appreciate you.
Thank you guys. Anytime.
Have a good weekend.
Scott Lauber, kind enough to hop on. All right, Gunnar, let's hit a break of fun. Good Philly stuff off the top, man. Let's come back. Let's talk birds. We'll talk about some of the guys who were not at practice today, and it's not good. It's not good.
And you look around the league, there's some big names not playing this weekend.
There's some big time injuries, which we'll get into all of that when we come back. Don't go anywhere. He's Derek Gunn. I'm Rob Ellis. We're Sports Take. All right, let's talk about Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group. Look, knowing who to trust with your finances, it's huge. You work as hard as you do, and you want to be able to be taken care of. You want your family taken care of. You got to find the right person. Whether that's retirement planning, 401k review, insurance review, small business, trying to get employee benefits off the ground, all of those kind of things. Look, I trust Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group implicitly. I've turned over my IRA, my 401k rollovers to them. I couldn't be any happier. You will be too. Give them a call, 610-996-4751, 610-996-4751, or you could email him as well.